The wind screamed over the rooftops of Warsaw as if it carried all the voices that had been lost to the war. Snowflakes, sharp as broken glass, flew sideways under the force of the storm. The night was thick and starless, a blanket of ink settling over the city, an oppressive darkness that pressed down on every crumbling building and every frightened heart. In the middle of Zlota Street, the marketplace, once the beating heart of the neighborhood, was now nothing more than a graveyard of abandoned stalls. Broken crates, shredded canvas sheets, and forgotten baskets lay scattered in the frost like remnants of a life people could no longer remember. There were no vendors shouting prices. No children snatching sweets while pretending not to be seen. No smell of baking bread drifting from nearby ovens. Now, the air only smelled of cold steel and distant gunpowder. Amelia Kowalska tugged her thin wool coat tighter around her, trembling as she made her way across the square, boots sinking into the heavy snow. The lantern she carried flickered in the wind, casting a trembling halo of light around her face. At 17, she had already forgotten what warmth truly felt like. Her cheeks were cracked from the cold, her lips constantly dry, and hunger gnawed like a familiar shadow inside her stomach. She reached a wooden stall half buried under snow and knelt beside it, brushing frost away from the wooden drawers. Her fingers were numb, refusing to obey her desperate commands quickly enough. She whispered through clenched teeth. "Please, let there be something." Her heart pounded as she pulled one drawer open. Nothing but a frozen clump of dirt and a dead beetle. She checked another. Splinters and cobwebs. A third, empty. And then the fourth. Her breath hitched. A single potato. Shriveled. Hard as a stone. But food. Food. She snatched it up, clutching it against her chest like a newborn child. Tears welled in her eyes, instantly freezing into crystalline drops before they could fall. She whispered a silent thank you, to fate, to God, to whatever force still cared whether she lived another day. Then came the siren. A long, piercing shriek that ripped through the silence and tore the world apart. Amelia's body froze. The lantern slipped from her hand and extinguished itself in the snow. Bombers. She looked up into the sky just as the clouds above her glowed with the fiery reflection of searchlights. The rumble of engines followed, deep, thunderous, like the growl of giants waking from slumber. "No, please, not tonight," she whispered. She turned and ran, feet slipping on the icy ground. The air raid siren continued its wailing, each pulse a warning that the next minute could be her last. Snow whipped into her face, but she did not dare slow down. She sprinted past shops with shattered windows, past barbed wire barricades, past faded propaganda posters peeling off stone walls. When she reached the entrance of the cellar shelter, she pounded on the metal door. "It's Amelia. Open up." A voice shouted from inside, hoarse and terrified. "Hurry. You'll get us killed." The door opened just enough for her to squeeze through before it slammed shut again. Inside, the shelter smelled of bodies packed too closely together, fear, sweat, old wool, and sickness. Amelia leaned against the wall, panting, as explosions echoed above. Dust fell from the ceiling like another layer of snow. Her mother rushed to her immediately, wrapping thin arms around her. "Where were you?" she whispered fiercely. "You know what happens when the sirens start." Amelia held up the potato. "I found this." Her voice quivered. For a moment, one brief moment, hope flickered in her mother's eyes. The next explosion was closer. People screamed. A child cried out for his father. An elderly man clutched his head as debris rained down. They waited in silence broken only by the thunder of destruction and the moans of buildings collapsing somewhere above. Minutes stretched into hours. Or perhaps it only felt that way. At last, the sirens fell silent. Not because the danger was gone, but because the enemy planes had left their devastation behind. The shelter door creaked open. Everyone stepped into the night cautiously, as if afraid the darkness might swallow them whole. Smoke drifted through the streets, mingling with the snow like black feathers falling from a wounded bird. Fires burned far down the block, painting the night orange. Amelia stared at the ruins of what used to be Mrs. Ostrowska's bakery. She remembered the warm pastries, the smell of cinnamon, the laughter of children lining up outside the door. Now, nothing remained but smoldering wood and twisted metal frames. Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't look too long," she whispered. But Amelia couldn't look away. Because every building, every ruin, was a memory torn apart. And memories were all she had left. Later that night, after crawling beneath threadbare blankets in the cold attic they called home, Amelia lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling boards. The potato rested on a plate beside her, a treasure too valuable to eat too quickly. Her younger brother, Merrick, slept beside her, only 12, but already he wore the hollow-eyed expression of someone much older. The war forced time to move differently. Childhood dissolved like snowflakes landing on skin. Her mother hummed a lullaby quietly, a song Amelia remembered from happier years, when their father still returned home from work each evening, when schoolbooks mattered more than ration cards, and laughter wasn't a luxury. But tonight, the lullaby couldn't drown out the echo of bombs. Amelia closed her eyes and pictured the marketplace as it once was, colorful, alive, overflowing with life. She could still see the banners of the merchant stalls fluttering, hear the bargaining voices, taste the aroma of smoking sausages, warm bread, and fresh apples. She remembered running through the aisles with her best friend, Natalia, red-haired, mischievous, always finding ways to sneak pieces of fruit into Amelia's pockets. But Natalia was gone. Taken away in a raid. Her house marked, her family dragged into trucks in the middle of the night. Amelia had not seen her since. Sometimes, she still imagined Natalia alive somewhere, whispering jokes, promising that one day they'd both leave this city and see the world beyond the borders drawn by soldiers. Morning arrived slowly, as though the sun feared to show its face. Amelia woke to the sound of boots crunching through snow outside. German soldiers were patrolling again. Their shadows moved past the window, long, sharp, and merciless. The family stayed silent until the voices faded away. Then, her mother spoke. "We need firewood. And water. Today we'll try the church's kitchen. They might still have soup." Amelia nodded. She wrapped herself in her coat, grabbed a dull kitchen knife, her only protection, and stepped outside into the frozen city. The silence was thick, as if even the birds had fled from the horrors. She passed a house with a collapsed roof. A pair of legs stuck out from under the snow and rubble. She didn't dare look at the face. In the distance, a German checkpoint had been erected overnight, blocking the main road. Soldiers inspected papers, shoved people, and laughed as a man slipped on the ice. A rifle butt struck another man in the stomach for walking too slow. Amelia turned down an alleyway to avoid them. That's when she saw him. A soldier. But not a German. He was slumped against a ruined wall, clutching his bleeding side. Snow covered parts of his uniform, but the insignia was clear. A Polish resistance fighter. His eyes fluttered open when he sensed her presence. He looked young, no older than his early 20s, yet exhaustion and pain had aged him. "Help," he gasped, breath forming a white mist. Amelia's heart thundered. If the Germans caught her helping him, she and her family would be executed. But if she left him, he would surely die here, cold and forgotten. She glanced around. No one in sight. Taking a shaky step forward, she crouched down beside him. "What happened?" she whispered. "Ambush," he replied, voice breaking. They're hunting us." He tried to shift his weight, wincing as blood seeped through his fingers and spread across the snow like spilled ink. Amelia's throat tightened. "What's your name?" she asked, though she didn't know why it mattered. "Jakub," he breathed. Jakub. A name that still sounded alive. Amelia scanned the ground around them and spotted a trail of footprints, German boots, leading away. They might return. At any moment. She took a deep breath. "I'll help you, but you have to be quiet. And you have to walk." Jakub nodded, teeth clenched in determination. She slid his arm over her shoulders and helped him to his feet. He cried out softly but managed to stand. "Where are we going?" he asked. "My home," she answered. But even as she said it, fear struck her heart. Bringing a resistance fighter into her attic, if the soldiers discovered him. She pushed the thought aside. There was no time for doubt. They limped through the alleyways, hiding behind dumpsters and shattered walls, moving like ghosts through the ruins. Every crunch of snow beneath their feet sounded like a gunshot. Every distant shout made them freeze. Finally, they reached her building, their sanctuary of crumbling bricks and cold winds. Amelia helped Jakob up the creaking stairs and into the attic. Her mother's eyes widened when she saw the wounded stranger, but she did not scream. She said nothing. She only pressed her hand against her heart and then rushed to boil what little water they had left. Jakob collapsed onto the wooden floor, panting. "Thank you," he whispered. Amelia knelt beside him, trying to clean his wound with trembling hands. "You're fighting for us," she said quietly. "For this city. I won't let you die." Jakob managed a faint smile. "Then maybe there's still hope," he said, before exhaustion finally pulled him into unconsciousness. Night returned once more, slower and heavier than the last. The cold seeped into bones. Outside, the marketplace waited in silence, its stalls still empty, its ghosts still wandering. In the attic, 3 frightened civilians and 1 wounded fighter lay awake, listening to the distant thunder of tanks rolling through the streets. War had taken their food. War had taken their safety. War had taken almost everything. But as Amelia sat beside Jakob, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest, she realized something. The war had not yet taken hope. And hope, even in the smallest, most fragile form, was enough to keep a nation alive. Morning arrived with the cruel indifference of winter. Pale light crept through the cracks in the attic roof, spreading across Amelia's sleeping form. She blinked awake, stiff from the cold that crept into her bones overnight. Her breath lingered in the air as a ghostly mist before dissolving into the frigid room. Her first thought was of Jakob. He lay on a pile of blankets in the corner, his face ashen, his brow beaded with sweat despite the icy temperature. His bandaged side was soaked through again, blood staining the cloth in dark reds and browns. His breathing was shallow but steady. Her mother was already awake, kneeling beside him with a small ceramic bowl in her hands. She dipped a rag into the warm water inside and gently dabbed at his face. "He needs medicine," she murmured. "If we don't treat the wound soon, infection will take him." "Where would we even find it?" Amelia asked quietly. Her mother sighed. "Black market, perhaps. But it's dangerous. Very dangerous." Amelia looked at the tiny potato sitting on the shelf, their one precious treasure. That could not cure a wound. It could barely keep them alive. Before she could think further, Merrick stirred from his place beside her. "Is he still breathing?" he asked groggily, rubbing his eyes. "For now," Amelia replied. Merrick nodded, his face troubled. "We can't let the soldiers find him." No one needed to say what would happen if they did. The day was beginning with a familiar chorus of footsteps and orders shouted in German on the street below. Patrols were more frequent now. Fear made everyone walk smaller, talk quieter, exist less. Even children no longer played outside. Joy had become suspicious. Amelia's mother looked at her children with weary resolve. "I'll go to the church," she said. "Maybe Father Antony still has some soup left. Or news." Amelia shook her head. "I should go instead." "You can't. They check papers more aggressively now," her mother insisted. If they take you," Amelia interrupted, voice tight with fear, "we'll starve." Their eyes locked. Each understood the risks, but there was no winning. Finally, their mother relented with a nod. "Stay away from the main roads. And if soldiers ask questions, don't look afraid." Amelia swallowed hard and prepared herself. She tucked the potato into a small cloth pouch, not to offer it, but to safeguard the last piece of hope they had. Jakob stirred weakly as she stood. "Where?" Are you going? To find help, Amelia replied. You have to hang on. Jakub's eyes fluttered open just long enough to meet hers. I will, he whispered. For Warsaw. His voice carried determination, but also a softness that made Amelia's heart ache. She stepped outside. Snow crunched under her boots with each careful step. Smoke from burned buildings mixed with the cold wind, creating a haunting haze that swallowed sound. Buildings once filled with laughter now wore holes where artillery shells had kissed them. She passed two young boys digging through rubble, their movements frantic. A German soldier stood nearby, smoking a cigarette and watching them as if they were dogs scratching for bones. When one boy slowed, the soldier kicked him without looking down. The boy didn't cry, he just kept digging. Amelia turned away, helpless rage simmering in her chest. Her path took her past the destroyed library, its books scattered and trampled into the snow, pages torn and stained with soot. Knowledge itself seemed to be dying. When she finally reached the church, she hesitated at the door. The once grand building now creaked with every gust, stained glass windows shattered and boarded over. The cross above the entrance was cracked but still stood tall like a guardian too wounded to fall. Inside, people huddled around a makeshift soup station. Thin broth, thinner smiles. Father Antoni moved from person to person, offering what little comfort he could. When he saw Amelia, his eyes softened. Child, he greeted. You came alone? My mother is caring for someone sick, Amelia whispered. We need medicine. Anything. The priest's expression darkened, and he leaned closer. You must be careful who hears you ask such things, he warned quietly. The Germans interrogate anyone offering aid to resistance fighters. Amelia's heart skipped. She said nothing, but fear crept into her eyes. He nodded grimly. I may know someone. Come back at nightfall. Nightfall? Her voice wavered. The streets were far more dangerous after dark. That is when hope travels more freely, he replied with a faint, tired smile. He handed her a small metal cup filled with thin cabbage soup. For your family. Amelia nodded gratefully and slipped the cup into her coat pockets. As she made her way back, she glanced toward the altar and paused. A candle still burned there, its flame small but unyielding. A hidden flame in a city trying to smother all light. By the time she returned home, her fingers had turned numb again. Her mother's relief when she saw the soup was quickly overshadowed by worry. Nightfall, she repeated. That's when the Germans search homes the most. I'll be careful, Amelia insisted. Marek slurped the soup eagerly, finishing his portion before Amelia even sat down. Her mother handed the rest of the cup to Amelia and then divided the last drops for herself. Jakub refused the soup when Amelia offered it. You need it more, he murmured. You need your strength, she countered. He shook his head faintly. I will not eat first in a starving home. His stubborn pride might have annoyed her if not for the sincerity in his expression. Instead, warmth spread in her chest, a feeling unfamiliar yet comforting. Hours crawled by. Amelia spent the afternoon mending Jakub's bandage with trembling hands. He woke occasionally, whispering warnings of German traps, of comrades captured and tortured. His breath hitched with each memory, but he tried to smile through the pain. You shouldn't risk yourselves for me, he whispered at one point. We already have, Amelia said. There is no turning back. Jakub's eyes softened. Then I will do everything to make sure it was worth it. Darkness began to fall. The city transformed. Shadows lengthened. Patrols multiplied. Fear clung to every wall like frost. Her mother gripped Amelia's shoulders before she left. If you see anything suspicious, if you feel unsafe, come home. Do not be brave. Live. Amelia hugged her tightly. I'll be back. Marek forced a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Bring something better than soup next time. I'll try, she promised, though she had no idea if she could keep that promise. The streets at night were a different world. Lamp posts glowed through the snow like lanterns in fog. The silence felt heavy, broken only by distant shouts or the occasional bark of a dog. She stuck to alleyways, clutching her coat tight. Every noise made her jump. Twice she ducked behind rubble as soldiers passed. When she reached the church, the door creaked open slightly, as if waiting for her. Father Antony stood inside the dim hall, hands clasped. "This way," he said softly. He led her through a narrow stairway beneath the chapel. At the bottom was an old storage room lit by a single oil lamp. Several figures gathered there, faces hidden, coats worn, eyes sharp. Resistance. Amelia froze. One of them stepped forward, a woman with dark hair tucked beneath a wool cap. She had the hardened look of someone who had survived too much too quickly. "You're the girl Father Antony spoke of?" she asked. Amelia nodded carefully. "Who's the wounded fighter?" "His name is Jakub," Amelia said. "He's in my home." The woman exchanged a look with the others. Some relief, some concern. Another man approached, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his cheek. "Where did you find him?" "In an alley near the north barricade," Amelia answered. "He was bleeding badly, ambushed." The scarred man cursed under his breath. "The Germans are tightening the noose. They must think the resistance is hiding near that district. They will search every building soon," the woman added grimly. "Your family is in danger." Fear shot through Amelia's chest like an arrow. "Then help us. Please." There was a pause. Then the woman nodded to someone in the corner. A small wooden box was brought forward. She opened it, revealing several items: rolled bandages, a small jar of sulfonamide powder, an early antibiotic, some morphine ampoules, and 2 pieces of bread so stale they looked like stones. "Take these," she said. "They're all we can spare tonight." Amelia's eyes glistened with gratitude. "Thank you. But listen carefully," the woman continued, lowering her voice. "If the Germans come to your building, you must hide Jakub where no patrol will think to look. If they find him, everyone in your home will hang." Amelia swallowed hard. "I understand." The scarred man pressed something cold into her hand. A small folding knife. "In case someone tries to take you," he said simply. Father Antony spoke next. "God be with you, child." Amelia turned to leave but paused. "Will you come for Jakub?" "When we can," the woman replied. "Until then, keep him alive." The journey back was worse. Twice she saw soldiers dragging civilians into trucks. Once she heard gunshots, quick, merciless. But she couldn't flee. She had to return. When she finally reached her attic, she shut the door and collapsed against it, trembling. Her mother rushed to her side. "You made it," she breathed in relief. Amelia nodded, but before she could speak, Jakub groaned in pain. His fever was rising. She hurried to his side and unpacked the supplies. Her mother helped apply the sulfonamide powder to the wound. Jakub clenched his jaw so hard she feared he might break his teeth. "It burns," he gasped. "It means it's working," Amelia whispered, wiping his forehead. When they finished, they broke the bread and shared it silently, each bite gritty but life-saving. Jakub refused again until they insisted. Finally, he ate a small piece. As they prepared for bed, Jakub caught Amelia's hand. "Thank you," he murmured. "You risked everything." "So have you," she replied gently. "We survived together, or not at all." His eyes lingered on hers, full of admiration and a hint of something deeper. Amelia's heart raced, and she quickly turned away. That night, the storm returned. Wind howled at the windows. Snow blew fiercely, trying to bury the city alive. Soldiers marched with lanterns, their voices echoing through the streets. Someone screamed outside, a sound cut short too quickly. Amelia lay awake long after Marek and her mother fell asleep. The attic felt smaller than usual, crushed by the weight of fear. Jakub stirred. "You're not sleeping," he whispered. "No," she admitted. "Too much to think about." He exhaled a slow breath, wincing. The Germans want to break this city, until people believe resistance is impossible. Will they succeed? She asked. Jakub's dark eyes burned with quiet fire. Not if we remember who we are, he said. Every act of survival is rebellion. Amelia held on to those words like a lifeline. Outside, sirens wailed again. Not an air raid this time, but a call for curfew patrols. Jakub closed his eyes. Rest, Amelia. Tomorrow will demand everything from us. She nodded and settled back, though sleep still refused to come. Instead, she watched the hidden flame of hope flicker inside Jakub, small but unbroken. War had taken their safety, their warmth, their smiles. But not their defiance. Not yet. In the city of empty markets, hope had learned how to live in shadows. And as long as even one flame survived the darkness, the city would never truly be conquered. Morning arrived again with the same relentless cold, but this time a new sound shook Amelia from her thin sleep, pounding on a nearby door. Heavy fists. Boots stomping. German voices barking orders. Jakub stirred in panic. Her mother pressed a hand over his shoulder, urging stillness. They're searching the buildings, she whispered. No one breathed. The pounding moved closer, echoing through the hall outside the attic. Amelia's heart thrashed in her chest like a trapped bird. Marek scrambled to hide the medical supplies beneath loose floorboards while their mother dragged a thick blanket over Jakub. Footsteps stopped just outside their door. For a terrible moment, silence ruled, only the sound of the winter wind scraping against the roof. Then a fist slammed against the door. Offnen. Now, a voice shouted. Her mother's face drained of color. She motioned for the children to stay hidden, then stepped forward, smoothing her clothes, trying to appear calm. She pulled the door open with trembling hands. 2 soldiers stood outside, rifles slung across their chests, frost clinging to their gray uniforms. A third man, a local collaborator wearing a thick fur coat, hovered behind them, looking smug and sickly satisfied. We are searching for a partisan fighter, one soldier growled, stepping inside without waiting for permission. The room suddenly shrank. Amelia stayed crouched behind a stack of crates while Marek hid beneath a small table. Jakub lay motionless under the blanket, eyes squeezed shut. Their mother attempted to speak calmly. We are just a widow and her children. We have nothing. The collaborator smirked. Everyone has something. Resistance fighters hide among civilians. You never know who your neighbor truly is. He scanned the attic suspiciously, eyes lingering on the pile of blankets over Jakub. Amelia held her breath so long her lungs screamed. A soldier yanked off the blanket. Jakub didn't move. His face remained turned away, eyes closed, trying to look like a corpse. The soldier wrinkled his nose. Looks like a dead rat. He dropped the blanket back with a sneer. The collaborator looked disappointed but forced a laugh. Very well. You won't mind if we take a look around. They tore through the room, kicking aside crates, prying open shelves, scattering the few belongings they still cherished. A small tin cup clattered loudly on the floor. Amelia flinched. Jakub's breaths grew faster, too fast. She prayed the soldier wouldn't hear. After what felt like hours, they seemed satisfied with their invasion. One soldier turned to her mother. If you see anything suspicious, anyone, report it. Or you will be treated like rebels. He tapped the butt of his rifle against the wall. The collaborator smiled thinly. For the good of the city. Then they left. When the door shut, the entire family collapsed inward, breathing, shaking, alive. Jakub gasped in pain, clutching his bandaged side. You must hide me better, he rasped. We will, Amelia promised, wiping tears she hadn't realized were falling. Her mother pressed her forehead to Amelia's. They know someone's hiding nearby. They'll return. Marek looked terrified. What if they come back with dogs? We will be ready, Amelia said, though she had no idea how. That afternoon, snow fell harder than before, blanketing the city like a funeral shroud. The streets emptied, hunger and fear forcing everyone inside. The markets remained barren, shelves bare, windows boarded shut against thieves and soldiers alike. Amelia ventured outside only long enough to gather firewood from a pile behind a destroyed house. Her fingers went numb in seconds. Each breath sliced at her throat like glass. She hurried back, cheeks burning with cold. Inside, Jakub's fever had not broken. His skin glowed with heat while the world around him froze. He needed shelter. Medicine. Food. He needed safety, and the attic was no longer safe. When Father Antoni had told her the resistance would come when they could, she hadn't realized it might be too late. As night fell, the bombing began. It came without sirens, artillery fire from beyond the river. The first explosion thundered through the city, rattling walls and shattering distant windows. Dust fell from the attic beams. Marek screamed, covering his ears. Her mother wrapped her arms around her children as another blast shook the building. The city lights flickered and died. Through the blackness, Jakub forced himself upright. "They're preparing for a major offensive," he gasped. "They want to erase this district. They think the resistance is hiding here." "They are," Amelia said quietly. Jakub didn't deny it. The bombardment continued, boom after boom, each impact closer than the last. Cries of terror echoed from nearby homes. Somewhere outside, a child wailed for their mother. Jakub pulled Amelia closer. "We must leave before the building collapses." "Leave?" Marek nearly shouted. "Go where?" "Father Antoni," Jakub said. "The church's cellar is built from old fortress stone. It's one of the safest places in the district." Amelia's mother hesitated only a second before nodding. "Gather what we can carry. We move now." They stepped into a world torn open by war. Fire lit the night sky as snowflakes melted against burning rooftops. Sirens cried from somewhere deep in the city. German soldiers rushed past with vehicles and floodlights, barking commands. But Amelia's family moved through the darkness, silent, determined, Jakub leaning heavily on her and her mother. His every step left a faint trail of blood in the snow. When they reached the church, the doors were wide open. Civilians flooded inside, families clutching blankets, elderly leaning on canes, babies bundled so thickly their faces barely showed. Father Antoni stood near the entrance, yelling instructions over the roar of distant explosions. "To the cellar. Quickly. Stay low." He spotted Amelia and ushered them inside with urgency. "We have little time, the bombing will worsen." The cellar was packed. People huddled together in fear. The stale air smelled of sweat and damp stone. But at least they were alive. Her mother found a corner to settle Jakub down. His breathing was ragged. Amelia wiped the sweat from his forehead. "You're safe now," she whispered. "For now," Jakub exhaled. Father Antoni approached with the resistance woman from the night before. The woman knelt beside Jakub and peeled back his bandage. Amelia looked away briefly. It was worse than she expected. The wound was swollen, angry red, the infection was spreading despite their efforts. "He needs surgery," the woman murmured. "If we wait, the infection will kill him faster than the Germans." Amelia's pulse hammered. "Can you save him?" "I can try," she replied, voice hardening with resolve. "But we need space. Supplies. And silence." Amelia nodded fiercely. She would make sure he had all three. Hours passed in the cellar, each minute stretched thin by fear. The walls vibrated with every explosion. Dust sprinkled down like morbid confetti. Someone was praying in the corner. Someone else sobbed quietly. The resistance woman began working on Jakub with the help of a young medical apprentice. Amelia held his hand. He squeezed so tightly she felt her bones shift. "You can curse if you need to," she whispered, voice trembling. Jakub smiled weakly. "I'd rather look brave, for you." Heat rushed to her face, even in the freezing cellar. She didn't let go. The woman poured wine over the wound to clean it. Jakub groaned so loudly that nearby children covered their ears. Amelia stroked his hair, whispering nonsense, anything to keep him with her. You are strong, stronger than this war, stronger than them. The woman worked quickly, threading needle and gut sutures with practiced hands. The apprentice handed her tools with shaking fingers. After what felt like an eternity, the procedure ended. The woman leaned back, wiping sweat from her brow. He will survive the night. If infection doesn't return. It wasn't a promise, but it was hope. Amelia bowed her head in silent gratitude. Just when calm began to settle, gunfire crackled outside the church. Everyone tensed. Soldiers. Shouts rang out. Boots storming through the snow. A command barked. Tear the place apart. Rebels are hiding inside. The cellar filled with gasps and terror. They're coming, Merrick whispered, voice trembling. Father Antony stood tall, gripping a wooden cross. They will have to pass through me first. The resistance woman pulled Amelia aside. Listen carefully, we need to hide Jakub. Now. Her heart lurched. Where? She pointed to a narrow gap behind stacked crates near the foundation, just big enough for a wounded man. Soldiers don't search there. It looks sealed. Amelia and her mother quickly lifted Jakub, suppressing his groans of pain. They maneuvered him into the dark hiding space. He winced but nodded, ready. The woman handed Amelia the folding knife again. If they find you, no one surrenders. Amelia swallowed hard. We'll stay silent. I promise. Boots pounded down the church stairs. Screams erupted above. And then, steel helmets appeared through the cellar doorway. The search had begun. Soldiers stormed into the cellar, flashlights slicing through the darkness. They shoved people aside, rifled through blankets, overturned crates. A woman was dragged away screaming. A young man was kicked until he stopped moving. Find the partisans, a German officer barked. A soldier moved closer to where Amelia hid. Her heart thudded so loud she feared he could hear it. She pressed against the crate, shielding Jakub with her body. Merrick huddled beside her. Another soldier ripped blankets away from a hiding family nearby. A baby wailed. Jakub's breath grew shaky. Amelia squeezed his hand, begging without words. Please. Please stay quiet. Her mother stood near the entrance, pretending to pray. Father Antony tried to reason with the soldiers, only to be shoved aside. Minutes dragged like hours. The search continued, yet by some miracle, the crates remained untouched. At last, an officer called out. Nix. Move on. It was over. For now. When the soldiers left, the cellar erupted in suppressed sobs, relief mixed with lingering terror. Amelia didn't cry. Not yet. She helped Jakub out from behind the crates and held him as if she feared he might vanish. He looked into her eyes, voice soft and hoarse. You saved me. Again. You saved us first, she replied. Their closeness felt different now, bound by more than chance. Bound by choices. Danger. Hope. Bound by war. Later, as the bombardment slowed to distant rumbling, the resistance woman approached Amelia again. They'll return soon, she warned. This place is compromised. What do we do? Amelia asked, dread already flowing through her veins. We move deeper underground, the woman replied. There's an old tunnel, built centuries ago. Forgotten by most. It leads toward the river. Will it take us to safety? Her mother asked quietly. No, the woman admitted. But it will keep us hidden until we find a new location. Jakub nodded weakly. We must keep moving. If we remain still, we die. Amelia's mother looked at her children. We stay together, she said. No matter what. The city groaned above them, streets collapsing, buildings burning, history turning to ash. Amelia helped Jakub to his feet. He leaned heavily on her. Her arm curled around his waist, steadying him. Thank you, he whispered. For what? She murmured. For not being afraid. She looked up at him through the flickering lantern light. I am afraid, she admitted. But I keep going anyway. He smiled. A tired, grateful smile. That is the bravest thing anyone can do. She felt warmth bloom in her chest again, this warmth born not from fires or blankets, but from something more powerful than winter and war. Hope. Faint as a flame. Hidden. Yet alive. As they prepared to move deeper into the darkness, Amelia looked back toward the stairs, where daylight once came and safety once lived. The city of empty markets was falling apart above them. But beneath the destruction, survival was evolving. Resistance was growing. And rebellion, quiet and determined, was breathing. As long as one spark remained, nightfall could not claim victory. Not while there were still hearts that refused to surrender. At dawn, frost crept over every cracked windowpane in Kronborg like a living thing. The snowstorm had thinned during the night, leaving behind a silence that felt hollow, like the city was holding its breath. Helena awoke with stiff fingers and a tightness in her chest that came from sleeping fully dressed to preserve warmth. She rubbed at her hands, blowing into them as she sat upright on her narrow cot. The apartment she shared with her mother was barely more than a single room carved from the top floor of an old bakery. The ovens that once warmed the building during winter now stood cold, silent, and soot-covered. Their landlord had fled the city long ago. The bakery's shelves, once filled with loaves that brought morning crowds, now held nothing but cobwebs and shattered glass. Another day of survival under occupation. Her mother was already awake, sitting near the window with her faded shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She watched the pale sky as if waiting for good news to fall from it. You didn't sleep, Helena said softly. Her mother didn't respond for a long moment, her eyes distant. The wind sounds like wolves, she murmured, her voice fragile. I kept thinking it was something else outside. Soldiers coming, or that the commandant would suddenly decide we've used too much firewood again. Helena forced a smile and crossed to her. There will be no soldiers today, she tried to assure her. But both of them knew it was a lie. There were always soldiers. The fear never left. By midday, Helena found herself back at the school-turned-clinic. Sophia was there as usual, sorting through dwindling supplies, humming under her breath in a futile attempt to lighten the cold air. The walls smelled of disinfectant mixed with damp plaster, and every footstep echoed too loudly. It was a place meant for laughter and learning, not bandages and whispered prayers. Marcus entered not long after, carrying 2 buckets of melted snow he had collected before sunrise. His face was raw from the cold, his gloves worn thin, but he wore that same determined expression he always did. Water for the day, he said. What little we have. Helena helped him set the buckets near the stove. But the water was precious, they would heat just enough to keep their patients' wounds from freezing. Everyone else would have to endure the biting air. Commander Voss had tightened rations again. The newspaper announced it with a single cruel phrase. Efficiency in times of war. The true meaning, starve the city into silence. Sophia stepped closer, bringing a folded paper she had hidden beneath her coat. It came this morning, she whispered. A new decree. Helena unfolded it carefully. The list of banned items grew longer every week: candles, radios, books not approved by the German Cultural Ministry. But her heart froze at one line in particular. Any unauthorized gathering near the riverfront is strictly prohibited. Violators will be executed as saboteurs. The river. Their lifeline. Their hope. Why the river? Marcus asked quietly. They know, Helena replied. Someone must have talked. Sophia glanced nervously at the windows, as though the walls themselves might report them. We should stop, she said. It's too dangerous now. No, Marcus snapped, but then softened his tone when Sophia's shoulders tensed. If we stop helping, then what's left of us? They'll have taken everything. Helena knew he was right, and yet she also felt the chill of fear settle into her bones. The river was frozen solid, but beneath it, a secret current still flowed, just like the Resistance. For months, rumors had spread of supply drops, crates hidden beneath the ice by Allied hands upriver, disguised as debris lodged along the banks. The Resistance retrieved them under cover of night. Food. Bandages. Ammunition. Small miracles. Without those drops, people would not last through another winter. She folded the decree and tucked it beneath a stack of patient forms. "We continue," she whispered. Just past twilight, Helena followed Marcus west toward the river. Sophia remained behind to tend to Mrs. Dufour's infected leg, though Helena suspected it was also fear that kept her inside. It was hard to blame her. The wind sliced through the city's abandoned outskirts, where buildings leaned like broken teeth. A once popular cafe stood dark, its sign half buried under ice. The streets were so quiet that every crunch of snow beneath their boots sounded like gunfire. Helena kept her scarf tight, covering everything but her eyes. Marcus led them to a collapsed fence, then down a steep path formed by footsteps of many nights past. They reached the riverbank, an expanse of white stretching beneath the moonlight. The ice groaned beneath the weight of winter. Two others from the Resistance were already there, crouched near a cluster of reeds. One of them, Emile, waved them over. "You're late," he hissed. "We came as quickly as we could," Marcus replied. Emile nodded to Helena. "You should stay close. If the patrol passes again." "It won't," Marcus cut in. They didn't have time for arguments. Another gust of wind swept across the ice, pushing dry snow into Helena's eyes. She blinked through it, spotting the wooden pole jutting from the ice near the center of the river. "A marker." "That's it," she whispered. Emile nodded. "Supplies are hooked beneath the ice. We just need." He stopped as the ice groaned again. Louder this time. A crack, thin as a whisper, snaked outward from the pole. The river was growing restless. Marcus knelt and removed a small iron hook tied to a rope. Carefully, he lowered it through a hole chipped earlier by someone else from their network. Water sloshed softly beneath the surface, dark, freezing death waiting to swallow anyone careless enough to slip. Helena held her breath. Minutes stretched like hours. The hook finally caught something solid. Marcus gritted his teeth and pulled, veins standing out in his neck. Emile and the others helped, and together they dragged a heavy crate upward until it struck the underside of the ice. Almost, just. A spotlight swept across the river. Helena's heart stopped. "German patrol. Get down." Marcus hissed. They dropped flat onto the snow. Helena pressed her cheek to the ice, feeling the terrifying vibration of boots and engine struggling through the snow along the river road. Her lungs screamed for air, but she dared not exhale loudly. A truck door slammed. Voices shouted in German, sharp, commanding, close. Helena's pulse hammered violently in her ears. The soldiers were searching. A dog barked. It had caught their scent. Marcus grabbed Helena's hand beneath the snow. She felt his grip tighten, comforting, steady, but desperate. Emile silently raised a pistol, but Helena shook her head vehemently. A single gunshot would bring an entire division down upon them. The barking grew closer. The soldiers moved toward the ice. Helena thought of her mother. She thought of the clinic. She thought of little Juliet, who still believed spring would come. Then, shouts erupted from across the riverbank. A distant explosion followed, small but enough to pull attention away. A diversion. The soldiers turned, yelling orders as they scrambled toward the direction of the blast. The barking faded with them. Helena exhaled shakily, frost briefly blooming in the air. "That was the northern group," Emile breathed. "They saved us. Then we move." Marcus urged, pulling again at the crate. No more hesitation. Together, they cracked through more ice, widening the hole. With a final heave, the crate burst through the slush and onto the surface. Helena wiped snow from the stamped insignia on top, a faded emblem she recognized from school maps before the war. The French Resistance. Inside were tins of preserved meat, medical gauze, and small packets of yeast, golden salvation for a city whose bakeries had long since died. 2 more markers downriver, Emile said. We come back tomorrow, if the river still holds. Marcus nodded, then turned to Helena. We should get this to the safe house before dawn. Can you manage? Yes, she said, though her arms trembled from cold and fear. They dragged the crate toward the shore, careful not to leave obvious marks in the snow. The patrol could return at any moment. Storm clouds gathered again over the city, thick and gray. Winter was far from done. Back at the school clinic, Sophia nearly collapsed with relief when she saw them. Marcus brought the crate inside and Helena secured the doors, feeling her fingers thaw painfully in the meager warmth. You made it, Sophia said, pulling Helena into a tight embrace. I was so afraid. Helena didn't let go for several seconds. It was the first time she allowed herself to show how terrified she had been. Mrs. Dufour stirred from her cot. Angels, she whispered hoarsely. You're all angels. But Helena didn't feel like one. She felt like a frightened animal, one slip away from being hunted down. Marcus stood near the stove, rubbing melted ice from his sleeves. They'll tighten surveillance by tomorrow, he said. We need to distribute what we can tonight before rumors spread. Helena nodded and knelt beside the crate, lifting the lid. For the first time in weeks, she saw abundance, even if only a small one. Canned goods stacked neatly inside. Packets of vitamins. Small sealed jars. And one item wrapped separately. A radio. Her breath hitched as she lifted it. Not one of the approved models. Not something the Germans could trace. A real link to the outside world. Marcus's eyes widened. If it works. We could hear broadcasts again, Sophia whispered. News. Hope. Hope. A fragile, revolutionary word. We must hide it, Helena said firmly. And we cannot use it until we find a safe location. They agreed silently. Helena sat back, marveling at the sheer weight of responsibility inside her chest. Supplies were one thing, but this radio? It was power. It was truth. It was a spark the commandant would put out with bullets if he ever found it. Sophia handed her a small tin of food. For you. You should eat first, she said. Helena shook her head. For the children, she replied. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. We'll make sure the children eat. But you aren't made of iron. You need strength too. For the briefest moment, Helena allowed herself to meet his gaze. Something warm flickered there, something human, beyond survival, beyond fear. A promise of something after all this. But then she looked away. Dreams were dangerous in times like these. The night deepened. Snow fell again, soft but relentless. Helena prepared to leave for home, exhausted, her stomach painfully empty. Marcus insisted on escorting her to the door. Helena, he said quietly, what happened tonight, it was necessary, she interrupted. We did what we had to do. Yes, he agreed, breath turning to vapor between them. But it was also brave. Helena shook her head. Bravery isn't real. It's just fear you can't run away from. Marcus gave a faint smile. Then you are the bravest person I know. Before she could respond, 2 sharp knocks rattled the clinic entrance. Sophia froze. Helena's pulse spiked. Marcus reached for a wooden plank resting near the door, an improvised weapon. He pressed a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. Another knock followed. Harder. Then a familiar voice, tense and hushed. It's Stefan. Please, open quickly. Relief washed through the room. Marcus slid the lock. Stefan, the young man who worked maintenance at the rail yard, stumbled inside, panting. His coat was torn, snow clinging to his hair. They're searching, he gasped. The German patrol, you must hide anything you brought from the river. They found footprints near the drop site. They're questioning everyone in the area. Sophia rushed to secure the crate beneath loose floorboards. Marcus barred the windows with blankets. Helena moved to the stove, tossing fresh logs in to disguise noise. Stefan leaned against a desk, shivering. And there's more, he whispered. Commandant Voss ordered a public execution at the square. Tomorrow at noon. Helena felt ice form in her veins. Who? She forced out. Stefan swallowed hard. He said, the city needs an example. They took 2 men from the textile factory. And 1 woman. Name, Helena demanded, stepping forward. Stefan's eyes glistened. Clara Muller. Helena's knees nearly gave out. Clara, gentle Clara, the one who baked stale scraps into small treats for orphan children. The one who shared everything she had left. Sophia collapsed into a chair, covering her mouth with trembling hands. Marcus closed his eyes. They think she knows something, Stefan said, voice breaking. They say she's part of the sabotage team, but she wasn't even near the river. Helena gripped the edge of a table, rage rising like fire. Commandant Voss wanted fear. He wanted the city on its knees. He wanted obedience. Clara was innocence. Clara was loved. Killing her would break Kronborg's heart. Marcus straightened, jaw clenched. We won't allow it. Sophia looked up, horrified. Marcus, what are you saying? Helena already knew. A plan had formed in his eyes like a storm. We're going to save her, Marcus said. Before the execution. Helena couldn't breathe. The danger was unimaginable. Rescuing someone from the Germans was madness. But she looked at Stefan, at Sophia, at the crate filled with hope and danger alike. She thought of Clara's kind smile. The world demanded a choice. Helena lifted her chin. Tell us everything you know, she said. We'll plan tonight. The wind howled through the city again, wolves circling in the dark. But this time, Helena no longer felt like prey. If the commandant wanted a battle, the resistance would give him one. Even if it cost them everything. The city bells struck midnight, though no one could remember the last time they were rung for anything joyful. The sound felt more like a warning now, cold metal echoing through streets that once overflowed with market stalls and chatter. Instead, those roads were barren, guarded by watchful soldiers and blanketed in snow that swallowed the light. Inside the clinic, lit only by a lantern with dying fuel, Helena, Marcus, Sophia, and Stefan sat around the table in tense silence. A map of the city, drawn by hand because official maps were confiscated, was spread before them. The ink bled where too much moisture touched it, as if the paper itself was weeping. Stefan tapped a spot near the square. They're holding Clara in the Rathaus prison wing. Basement level. Guards rotate every 2 hours. Sophia shook her head. Breaking someone out of a German-controlled municipal building? We'd die before reaching the door. Marcus looked determined, reckless, even. We have the radio now. We could intercept patrol schedules if he trailed off, his eyes shifting toward Helena. He wanted her to volunteer. Because she was the only one with proper medical clearance. Helena swallowed hard. I could claim I'm checking on injured workers. The Germans value labor more than lives. If I act confident, I might get inside. That's too risky, Sophia gasped. If they so much as ask one question you can't answer. Helena cut her off quietly. Every option is dangerous. Even doing nothing. Marcus nodded approvingly. We'll need uniforms. We'll need forged documents. He tapped the map again. Carl at the printing shop can help with papers. And I can get a coat from the depot. And weapons? Stefan asked. Silence. There were none. Marcus flexed his hands, cracking cold knuckles. We rely on speed. Stealth. No gunfire unless we have no choice. Helena breathed in shakily. The plan was forming, fragile as the ice covering the river, but it was a plan nonetheless. We only get one chance, she whispered. Hours later, Helena found herself standing at the clinic window, watching the storm roll in. Snowflakes caught the moonlight like ghostly embers. Her thoughts spiraled from fear to determination to crippling doubt. The door creaked behind her. Couldn't sleep? Marcus asked softly. She didn't turn. I keep thinking of yesterday. How close we came to being caught. He stepped beside her. His presence held warmth even when the room didn't. You saved us, he said. Without you. Helena shook her head. Don't put me on a pedestal. It's too easy to fall. Marcus smiled faintly. Maybe. But you don't have to stand alone. For a moment, the world outside disappeared into the quiet falling snow. His hand brushed hers, tentatively, respectfully, but she didn't pull away. The touch grounded her more than fear could shake her. But then he cleared his throat, stepping back. If something goes wrong tomorrow. It won't, Helena interrupted quickly, terrified of acknowledging the truth. But if it does, he insisted. Promise me you'll run. Don't freeze. She faced him, eyes narrow with resolve. I'm not planning to die, Marcus. He nodded once, but she could see the worry still dancing in his eyes. At dawn, Helena slipped into the streets before her mother awoke. Guilt pressed her shoulders down, but she left anyway. If she looked back, if she saw her mother's tired hope, she might falter. Snow crunched under her boots as she crossed the river district. Smoke from German outposts stained the gray sky. Shops that once smelled of cinnamon bread and raw fish were boarded shut, covered in propaganda posters. Obey, work, sacrifice for the Reich. A soldier marched by with a rifle slung across his back. Helena kept her head down. Workers in worn coats queued silently for bread rations that would never be enough. Kronborg was dying. Starvation was just a slower bullet. She turned down a narrow alley where a faded sign read Schneider and Sons Printing. The windows were frosted over, letters half hidden beneath ice. Helena knocked 3 times, soft, then hard. Locks clinked, and the door opened a crack. Her Carl, it's Helena, she said under her breath. The old printer's tired eyes peeked out. Come in before someone sees you. Inside, the shop smelled of ink and musty paper. Machines stood silent, dust gathering on their gears. Carl bolted the door before speaking. You're asking for forged documents, he whispered. If the commandant discovers this. We'll pay whichever way you need, Helena said firmly. We're saving Clara Muller. Carl's jaw tensed. That woman, he murmured. She once brought me soup when my son was sick. The last soup he ever ate. He turned away, his shoulders trembling. How many lives must one kind person pay for? His voice cracked, but when he turned back to Helena, his eyes were steel. Tell me what you need. Helena produced a slip with details Marcus had gathered: doctor authorization, inspection order, emergency seal. Carl studied it and nodded. Come back in 2 hours. It would be the longest 2 hours of Helena's life. The noon bells were drawing nearer. The wind pushed against Helena's hood as she made her way toward the Rathaus Square again. Carl's forged papers felt like a lead weight against her chest, tucked inside her coat. Snow fell heavier, veiling the world in white. The square loomed ahead, large and bleak, framed by Nazi banners. Black-clad soldiers stood like pillars of fear. A wooden scaffold was being constructed. Preparing for execution. Helena fought back bile at the sight of it. She reached the guard post at the Rathaus entrance. A soldier with a scar marching across his cheek stepped forward, rifle angled across his chest. Halt. Papers, he barked in German. Her heart hammered like a drum. She handed them over, keeping her shoulders straight, confident, unshaken. The guard scanned them, too slowly. What is the purpose of your visit? He asked. I'm here to check the factory prisoners for infectious disease, she replied in crisp German. the Reich needs healthy workers. If illness spreads through the cells, productivity will fall. His eyes narrowed. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Sweat trickled down her spine. Finally, with a snort of annoyance, he handed the papers back. You have 10 minutes. The commandant is expecting order. 10 minutes. Not a second more. Danke, she muttered, and stepped inside. The Rathaus wasn't a building anymore, it was a prison. Hallways that once served frightened citizens now echoed with boots and misery. Voices, pleading, shouting, bounced off the walls like ghosts. A young clerk led her downstairs. The stench of damp stone and fear hit her instantly. Then she heard it, Clara's voice. Soft. Trembling. Singing, a lullaby. As if calming a child that wasn't there. It broke Helena's heart like glass. And then Clara appeared, sitting behind iron bars. Bruised. Exhausted. Yet when she lifted her head, she smiled. Helena, she whispered. I knew you'd come. Helena gripped the bars. I'm getting you out. Clara's eyes glistened. They'll kill you. Helena shook her head. They'll try. Keys jingled behind her. Marcus. Her breath caught in surprise. Dressed in a stolen guard's coat, helmet shadowing his face. You took long enough, he whispered with a teasing edge. Helena almost laughed. Almost. He unlocked the cell quickly. Clara stumbled, weak from days without food. Helena caught her, nausea rising at the burns on Clara's wrists. Can you walk? Helena asked. Clara nodded, though it was clearly painful. But as Marcus guided them into the dark hallway, Helena noticed something. The young clerk was gone. The corridor too quiet. A trap. She grabbed Marcus's sleeve, but too late. A gun cocked behind them. Drop the keys, a voice hissed. Commander Voss stepped from the shadows, his leather coat pristine despite the damp. The cold in his eyes wasn't weather, it was a weapon. Helena's heart twisted. He had known all along. You disappoint me, Fräulein Weber, he said with calm venom. I suspected your compassion would betray you eventually. Clara whimpered quietly. Marcus slowly lowered the keys, hands raised halfway. Helena stood frozen, fear rooting her feet to stone. Voss smiled at her fear. It's admirable, really, he mused. How the weak cling to hope, even when the world is determined to crush it. He nodded subtly to the guard beside him. Shoot the man first. No. Helena cried. Time splintered. Marcus turned, too fast, grabbing the guard's rifle barrel. The shot fired, deafening in the stone corridor, blasting dust from the walls. Helena jumped, stumbling backward with Clara. Run! Marcus shouted. Helena didn't think. She dragged Clara toward the stairs. Boots thundered behind them. More gunshots. Men shouting. Clara gasped in pain, her foot slipping on icy stone. Helena hauled her up, her own muscles screaming. The stairway felt endless, every step a battle against terror. They burst onto the snowy street. Sirens erupted across the square, alarms screeching like dying birds. Civilians scattered, soldiers raced toward the Rathaus, rifles raised. Over here! Stefan shouted from an alley, waving desperately. Bullets struck the wall inches from Helena's head. She shoved Clara toward Stefan, then turned instinctively. Marcus appeared at the doorway, staggering, blood staining his coat. Helena screamed his name. Go, he roared. Don't let them take. A shot cut him off. His body jerked violently and collapsed into the snow. Helena's world shattered. Marcus, she shrieked, but Stefan's hands grabbed her arms, dragging her back. We can't save him, he cried. If we stay, Clara dies and Marcus's sacrifice is pointless. Helena fought against him like a wild animal, screaming, clawing, but his grip was iron. Clara sobbed brokenly, helpless. Helena's vision blurred with tears as Stefan pulled them deeper into the alleyway. The wind howled, masking their footsteps as they vanished into the labyrinth of streets. But Helena looked back, once, seeing Marcus's still form growing smaller, swallowed by soldiers and swirling snow. Her heart felt like it had been torn from her chest. They didn't stop until they reached the sewer grate near the frozen river. Stefan pried it open with shaking hands, urgency turning him feral. Clara descended first, Helena last, her throat raw from silent sobs. The tunnel smelled of mold and decay, but even death was safer than the world above. Stefan secured the grate behind them. Darkness. Heavy. Crushing. Helena slid down the wall, her body trembling uncontrollably. Clara knelt beside her, tears tracking through grime on her cheeks. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered. "I never wanted." Helena grabbed her hand tightly. "You're alive," she said through clenched teeth. "That's all that matters now." But the emptiness inside her betrayed those words. Marcus was gone. His last look, full of defiance and devotion, was seared into her memory. He had died so they could live. She would not fail him. Helena rose, strength returning like a slowly lit flame. "We keep moving," she said. "We protect Clara. We finish what he started." Stefan nodded, eyes red but determined. The tunnels led them deeper underground. The city's muffled chaos faded above them, swallowed by old stone and dripping pipes. But the war was not done. Their fight was not over. Helena's heart, once full of quiet kindness, now burned with something new. Vengeance. Commander Voss would pay. The soldiers would pay. The entire machine grinding Kronborg into dust would face her wrath. The walls around her whispered with the ghosts of resistance past. She no longer feared them. She was one of them. And winter still had chapters left to write. Snow hammered the rooftops of Bramberg like artillery from the sky, relentless and unfeeling. By December's first week, every narrow alley and bomb-shattered courtyard was buried beneath thick layers of ice. Windows froze shut, chimneys belched only faint trails of smoke, and breath turned to frost inside homes where hope flickered like a dying candle. Elena von Richter tightened her coat around her body as she stepped outside the volunteer barracks. The wool was thinning, so many coats had been unraveled to line blankets for children that they now wore patchwork armor against the cold. The air was so sharp that it burned the inside of her nose. She paused under a street lamp, its glass shattered long ago, and exhaled to watch the ghost of her breath vanish into nothing. The city was quieter than ever. The markets, once alive with vendors shouting prices of fresh bread and cured meats, were silent as graveyards. The Germans holding the city issued ration cards, but the papers meant little when the supply convoys couldn't break through the snow or the gunfire along the roads. People bartered instead, shoes for potatoes, a family heirloom for a handful of coal. Elena passed a line of citizens waiting outside the abandoned cathedral. Red Cross volunteers distributed thin soup twice a day. When the kettles ran dry, people waited anyway, as if the angels might descend to feed them if they prayed long enough. A boy no older than 6 stared up at her as she walked by. His cheeks were sunken, his hands were blue even inside threadbare mittens. "Miss, do you have anything to spare?" Elena knelt, pulled an apple from her pocket, one of only 2 she had saved for the week, and pressed it into his palms. His eyes widened, not with joy but disbelief. "For you," she said softly. The boy nodded, too choked by gratitude to speak, then disappeared into the cluster of desperate figures. Elena stood slowly. The guilt in her chest weighed heavier than the winter coat. At city headquarters, Colonel Reinhard Wilhelm studied the latest map pinned to the wall. The front lines crept closer every day, a noose tightening around Bramberg. Enemy forces, a coalition of European armies advancing from the east, had cut off nearly every path in and out. Major Dieter Scholz stood beside him, flipping through reports. "If we don't receive supplies within 2 weeks," he muttered, "we will lose more civilians to hunger and cold than to shelling." Colonel Wilhelm didn't answer at first. His eyes lingered on the northern outskirts, the industrial district where he had once worked as a simple foreman before the war swallowed his life whole. "They're targeting the factories," he said finally. "If they fall, Bramberg falls." "And your plan remains the same?" Scholes asked quietly. Wilhelm nodded. He hated the necessity of it. "We will evacuate the sick and the elderly first. Then the children." Scholes hesitated. "And the soldiers?" A long silence. "Then we stay." That afternoon, Elena arrived at the headquarters infirmary where the smell of antiseptic failed to mask the odor of rot. Beds were filled wall to wall, with makeshift cots laid out in the corridors. Doctors moved like ghosts, exhausted and mechanically efficient. "Rosa?" Elena called. Her fellow nurse looked up from a patient whose leg was wrapped in blood-stained bandages. Rosa's eyes were rimmed with fatigue and sorrow. "We lost 3 more this morning," she whispered. 2 children, and Frau Keller." Elena's stomach dropped. Frau Keller had always greeted them with a smile, even when her lungs wheezed and her fingers trembled violently. "I was with her," Rosa continued, voice cracking. "She wasn't afraid." Elena reached for her friend's hand and squeezed it. It was cold as ice. "We keep going," Elena said, a promise she barely believed in. Outside, the sound of distant artillery rippled through the sky. The windows rattled, dust fell from the ceiling. The siege had begun. Elena rushed out into the frigid streets, soldiers already scrambling into defensive positions along sandbag barricades. Colonel Wilhelm stood atop the steps of the old town hall, barking orders. "They're testing our defenses," he growled. "We hold the line, no matter the cost." He turned as Elena approached, their eyes meeting briefly, a silent conversation filled with fear, resolve, and the unspoken knowledge that both of their hearts now beat faster for more than patriotism. Wilhelm broke eye contact. "You should go inside. It's not safe out here." "It isn't safe anywhere," Elena replied. A shell exploded 2 blocks away, flinging snow and debris into the air. The ground trembled beneath their feet. A young soldier named Lucas sprinted toward them. "Colonel! A unit is pinned near the tram station. They're calling for reinforcements." Wilhelm grabbed his rifle. "Scholes, with me." Elena stepped forward. "I'm coming too, there will be wounded." Wilhelm hesitated, wanting to refuse her. But the truth was clear, without nurses, soldiers died even after the bullets stopped. "Stay close to me," he warned. She nodded. The tram station was a ruin of shattered glass and twisted steel. Snow fell through the collapsed roof in swirling currents. Muzzle flashes flickered from behind broken ticket kiosks. Gunfire echoed like thunder trapped in a cage. Wilhelm and his squad took cover behind overturned benches. Elena knelt beside a soldier bleeding heavily from a chest wound. The cold made his blood spill slower, but not slow enough to save him. "Fernando, my wife," he choked. Elena pressed cloth to the wound. Her hands were numb but steady. "Save your strength. We'll get you home." His eyes dimmed even as she lied. Wilhelm fired several shots, driving back advancing infantry. He shouted for retreat, covering the withdrawal while Elena dragged the wounded one by one behind the barricade. "Move! Move!" shouted Scholes, voice hoarse. Another explosion sent snow and splinters through the air. Elena stumbled and fell. Wilhelm rushed to her, shielded her with his own body as debris rained down. For a moment, all Elena heard was ringing, sharp and endless. When it faded, she realized Wilhelm's arms were still wrapped around her. Their faces inches apart. "You're alive?" he asked urgently. She nodded, breath trembling. They pulled apart slowly, the world snapping back into danger the moment their connection broke. Night fell, and with it came the worst cold Bramberg had ever known. It crept under doors, slipped between bricks, stole inside lungs until breathing felt like swallowing knives. Elena walked back toward the barracks long after the fighting subsided. Her boots crunched over frozen blood. The silence felt wrong, too still, too absolute. Up ahead, Colonel Wilhelm stood alone by a burned-out car. Snow gathered on his coat. His breath formed clouds that vanished into the dark. "You should be resting," he said without turning. "So should you." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "Commanders must be stubborn. Nurses too, it seems." She stepped beside him. The city stretched before them, a white wasteland dotted with fires smoldering in oil drums. "They will come again," Elena whispered. "Yes." His voice was steel wrapped in sorrow. "And the people, they're struggling more every day." Elena watched her breath disappear. "I fear hunger will kill them before the bombs do." Wilhelm didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and produced a small book. "A soldier gave this to me today before he died. He wanted someone to keep it safe." Elena traced the worn leather cover. Poetry. A love poem handwritten inside. "He carried hope to the very end," she said softly. Wilhelm's eyes met hers, blue yet shadowed by grief. "We fight so they can keep believing," he murmured. "Even if we stop believing ourselves." For a long moment, neither of them looked away. Then, footsteps approached, Scholl's face pale beneath his helmet. "Colonel," he said urgently. "Recon confirms the main assault begins within 48 hours. Wilhelm straightened. "Then we prepare." By morning, soldiers fortified every entrance to the old market square, the heart of the city and the last place with underground shelters intact. Civilians huddled inside, wrapped in blankets, lighting candles for warmth and prayer. Father Matthias led the town in quiet hymns that echoed faintly across the frostbitten square. Those who couldn't sing simply listened, hope carried in someone else's voice. Elena moved from family to family, dispensing ration patches of dried bread and melted snow. Children clung to their mothers, frightened of both silence and sound. An elderly man tugged her sleeve. "Will we survive this?" he croaked. Elena wanted to give him certainty. Instead, she gave him truth. "We will survive today," she said. "And tomorrow, we will fight for tomorrow." Tears slid down the man's wrinkled cheek, freezing before they fell. That night, the sky to the east glowed orange, artillery fire reflecting off snow clouds. The ground shook again and again. Wilhelm stood on the market's barricade, rifle slung across his back, binoculars pressed to his eyes. "They're bringing armor," he said to Scholz. "We can't hold against tanks for long." "We don't need long," Wilhelm replied. "Just enough time to evacuate the civilians." The decision was made. But to execute it meant sacrificing the remaining soldiers. Elena approached. "What are you planning?" Wilhelm lowered the binoculars. "If we don't delay the enemy, no one will escape the city alive." Realization struck her like a blow. "You're going to lead a diversion." He nodded. "No," she said, stepping closer. "Reinhard, please." He looked at her with a softness that threatened to break him. "Elena, this is my duty. It's also your life. And it belongs to this city." She grabbed his gloved hand. "Not just the city," she whispered. He inhaled sharply at her words, the truth she no longer feared saying. "Elena," he murmured. "If there were another way." "But there isn't," she finished for him. Snowflakes drifted between them, melting on the warmth of their skin. He leaned forward, voice trembling just enough to reveal the man beneath the uniform. "Promise me something." She brushed her thumb over his hand. "Anything. If Bramberg falls, if I do not return, you must live. You must see spring again." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. "I don't want spring without you." He smiled, a sad, beautiful smile. "It will come whether we want it or not." Their foreheads touched, breath mingling in the frigid air. For the first time since the siege began, the world felt silent. Not dead. Not empty. Just holding its breath. Waiting. The alarms blared, piercing whistles echoing through every street. "Enemy advance inbound." All civilians, to the shelters. Wilhelm pulled away, swallowed his fear, and turned commander once more. Scholes. Prepare the demolition teams. We hold them at the river. He faced Elena one last time. Go with the convoy. Help them escape. And leave you behind, she demanded. Stay alive, he said, his final order to her, before turning and disappearing into the forming ranks of soldiers. Elena stood frozen, snow swirling around her like ash. The crowd surged toward the tunnels. The city roared with gunfire and engines and the metallic thunder of tanks advancing through winter's white coffin. Her heart clenched. Her legs moved. But not toward safety. She ran toward the front. The riverfront was chaos, flashing tracers, thunderous blasts, screams drowned by artillery. Smoke mixed with snow, turning the air into a choking fog. Wilhelm and his men detonated the first bridge, a plume of fire lighting the night. Enemy armor halted momentarily, regrouping. It wouldn't stop them for long. Elena hurried behind a toppled statue, searching for Wilhelm's silhouette in the madness. A gunshot cracked close. She ducked, breath sharp and panicked. Elena. Wilhelm spotted her and rushed across the ice-coated street. He grabbed her shoulders, furious and terrified. Why are you here? She couldn't speak, the fear, love, desperation tangled her voice. All she could do was hold on to his coat like a lifeline. You disobeyed my order, he rasped. And I would do it again. He stared at her, the storm of war reflected in his eyes. But before he could reply, a blast struck nearby. The shockwave flung them both to the ground. Elena's ears rang. Her vision blurred. Snow fell like feathers from a burning sky. Through the haze, she saw Wilhelm rise, stumbling but standing between her and the advancing enemy. He lifted his rifle. A second explosion flashed. Wilhelm crumpled. No. Elena screamed, crawling toward him through the snow. He lay still, face peaceful as if merely sleeping. The world narrowed to a single point, the man she loved, blood blooming beneath him like a dark red flower. She pressed her hands to his chest. Reinhard, please, please. His eyelids fluttered. Enough to look at her one last time. Elena, he whispered, her name carried on the final warmth of his breath. Then he was gone. Snow covered his body like a shroud. The first soldier to fall in Bramberg's final battle was also its strongest heart. The tanks rolled forward. The river defenses shattered. The city's last hope dimmed like a candle dying beneath the cold. Elena did not flee. She did not cry. She simply stood, eyes forward, hands trembling, heart burning with a fire no winter could extinguish. For Reinhard. For Bramberg. For every soul clinging to life in the empty markets of a dying city. And as the enemy descended upon them, Elena whispered a promise into the freezing night. I will see spring again. Even if she had to survive hell to reach it. The night swallowed the city whole. Cold winds screamed through the shattered streets of Bramberg as enemy soldiers poured in from the eastern avenues. Their boots crunched over ice and debris, rifles drawn, scanning every alley for resistance. Searchlights swept the fog like white blades cutting through darkness. Elena knelt beside Colonel Reinhard Wilhelm's lifeless body, snow settling softly onto his still chest, turning the crimson stain beneath him into a purple shadow of what had been life mere moments ago. She brushed trembling fingers over his cheek, feeling the warmth fading fast, stolen by winter and war. Gunfire erupted again in the distance. A shouted command. The clatter of tank treads crushing what remained of the river barricade. There was no time to grieve. Elena. Rosa's voice cut through the chaos from behind a collapsed wall. We have to move. Elena did not stand. Her heart refused to leave him there, a soldier who gave everything for the city he loved, the man who had taught her that hope was worth dying for. Elena. Rosa yelled again, desperation cracking her voice. If we stay, we die. He would want you to live. Snowflakes melted on Elena's cheeks, or perhaps they were tears. She leaned forward and pressed a kiss to Reinhard's forehead, closing his eyes with shaking fingers. "I will see spring for both of us," she whispered. Then she rose and ran. They retreated through alleyways and broken courtyards until the sound of tanks became a distant growl. Smoke from burning buildings smeared the sky into a charcoal haze. Fires flickered like dying stars against the snow. At the entrance to the refugee tunnels beneath the market district, families poured inside, carrying what little they still possessed: a blanket, a pot, a child too weak to walk. Panic and hope intermingled in every frantic movement. Major Scholes stood guard with the remaining soldiers, his face streaked with ash. When he saw Elena approach with Rosa, his expression softened in relief. "Thank God," he breathed. "I thought we lost you too." Elena tried to speak but only a sob escaped her. Scholes understood without words. Did he? He lowered his voice, eyes already knowing the answer. Elena swallowed hard and nodded. For a moment, Scholes stared at the ground. Then, with grim resolve, he turned toward the tunnels. The colonel's final orders stand. We protect the evacuation at all costs. He faced his soldiers, fewer than 50 still alive. We hold until every civilian is beneath the mountain. No one argued. They simply took position. Elena moved into the tunnels, guiding frightened children down ice-slick steps. Candles lined the walls, their flames fluttering in the stale air. The underground caverns stretched far into the old mining shafts, a labyrinth carved into stone long before the war. Here, the last heartbeat of Bramberg would hide. Father Matthias stood near the entrance, offering whispered blessings to each person passing through. "Elena," he whispered gently as she approached. "You must rest. Your hands are shaking." "I can't," she said, forcing strength into her voice. "Not while they still fight up there." The priest nodded, understanding the fire beneath her grief. "The Lord sees your courage. And Reinhard's sacrifice will not be forgotten." Elena flinched at his name. She turned toward the exit again. She needed air, needed movement, needed to do something other than drown in the memory of his final breath. On the surface, the battle escalated. Shells exploded against stone. Snow became smoke. The pavement rippled with shockwaves. Soldiers fell, but more rushed to replace them, a desperate defense against inevitable doom. Scholes fired his pistol until the barrel glowed hot, shouting commands that were carried away by the storm. One by one, his men were forced back toward the tunnel entrance. "Elena," he called when he saw her emerge. "You weren't supposed to return." "I'm staying with you," she said. "They will need care." He wanted to protest, but the look in her eyes left no room for doubt. She was done running. She grabbed her medical satchel and rushed to the nearest wounded soldier. Blood stained the snow too red, too thick. She worked quickly, torn cloth for pressure, morphine for mercy. The wounded man clutched her wrist. "Will we see tomorrow?" Elena did not lie this time. "We will see dawn," she said. "And dawn is a kind of tomorrow." His grip loosened as he exhaled, comforted enough to close his eyes. Rosa emerged moments later with extra bandages. Her hair was dusted white with snow and ash. "The children are safe for now," she said breathlessly. "Some of the elderly too. But the tunnels can't hold everyone forever." Scholes wiped sweat from his brow despite the cold. "They only need to last until reinforcements arrive." Elena stared at him. "You truly believe help will come?" He did not answer. Because believing was all they had left. Then, the tanks appeared at the end of the street. Black silhouettes, monstrous and unstoppable. Soldiers swarmed behind them. Scholes shouted, "Fall back! Protect the entrance!" Machine gun fire ripped through the air. Snow burst upward in plumes where bullets struck. Elena dragged another wounded soldier behind a pillar. "Stay with me," she begged as his eyes rolled with pain. Rosa knelt beside them, applying a dressing with frantic hands. "This is madness," she cried. "It's survival," Elena replied. Scholes fired again, but then a round caught his shoulder. He staggered, falling to one knee. "Dieter!" Elena shouted. He waved her off. "Help the others!" But a second shot struck his side, and he collapsed fully, breath hissing through clenched teeth. Elena ran to him, tearing open her satchel. Blood poured from between his fingers. "Save them," he gasped. "Promise me, the civilians." Elena shook her head desperately. "Don't talk like that." Scholes managed a weak smile. "The colonel would be proud of you." Elena pressed harder, but her palms were slipping in blood. With a final rattling exhale, Major Dieter Scholes, the last officer of Bramberg, fell still. Elena froze, trembling. Rosa touched her shoulder. "We have to move." Elena looked up. The tanks were advancing over the bodies of fallen defenders. She rose, heart numb, and turned toward the tunnel entrance. "Seal it," she shouted to the remaining soldiers. A young private stared at her, horrified. "But you're still out here." "So are you," she said firmly. "And we are the line between them and those families." He nodded, tears freezing on his lashes, and signaled the engineers. Explosives were set on the archway. Elena grabbed Rosa's hand. "Stay behind me." The final civilians rushed below, mothers, widows, orphans, their sobs echoing like ghosts in the stone. Elena waited until the last possible moment, then gave the order. "Now!" A thunderous explosion shook the ground. The tunnel entrance collapsed in a storm of dust and stone, sealing the survivors inside the mountain. There would be no retreat. The soldiers left above ground looked to Elena, the nurse who refused to abandon them, as if she were the only light left. Elena inhaled the icy air, squared her shoulders, and prepared to face death. "For Bramberg," she whispered. "For Reinhard." The enemy surged forward, expecting the defenders to surrender. They did not. Elena moved among the wounded, tearing strips from her coat to bind their injuries. She had no weapons, only hands that still tried to save life in a world obsessed with taking it. Rosa picked up a fallen rifle to defend her friend, firing shaky shots into the oncoming line. The recoil jolted her thin frame, but fear fueled her strength. A tank turret slowly turned toward them. Elena grabbed Rosa, pulling her behind a stone fountain just as the cannon fired. The explosion hurled them both into the snow. Elena's vision went black at the edges. When it cleared, half the square was gone. The fountain lay in shattered pieces. Rosa did not move. "No," Elena crawled to her. "Rosa, look at me." Her friend's eyes fluttered. Blood seeped from a wound near her ribs. "Elena," she breathed in a whisper. "Thank you, for not letting me die alone." Elena clutched her. "You're not going anywhere, do you hear me?" But Rosa only smiled with quiet relief. Then her chest fell still. Another friend stolen. Another piece of Elena's heart carved away. She screamed, not in fear, but in anger. The sound tore from her body like a wounded animal, a cry of everything she had lost, everything she had endured. It was the scream of a soul refusing to die quietly. The enemy paused, stunned not by strength, but by her defiance. Then, searchlights suddenly swung skyward from the western hills. Shouts echoed among the enemy forces. New artillery thundered, but not from them. A distant horn. Engines roaring. The army of a neighboring nation, long delayed by storms and politics, had finally arrived. Reinforcements. Hope. A blizzard of gunfire rained down upon the enemy tanks, blowing tread and metal skyward. Soldiers who had moments ago tasted victory now scrambled for cover. Elena stared in disbelief. Lights approached through the storm, dozens of trucks, medics, and infantry racing to save the city. She fell to her knees, numb with relief as the battle turned. But for Bramberg's defenders, reinforcements came too late to save the city, only the lives hidden beneath it. Hours later, silence returned to the streets. Snow settled over the carnage like a burial veil. Fires hissed, then died into smoke. Reinforcement troops moved through rubble, searching for those still breathing. Elena von Richter, a medic called as he approached. His expression softened when he saw the blood covering her coat. "You're hurt, let me." "No," she said hoarsely. "There are others. Help them first." But her legs weakened and the medic caught her before she collapsed. As he lifted her into a stretcher, she whispered the name that still weighed heavy on her lips. Reinhard. They placed her in a transport truck filled with other survivors. As it rumbled toward the mountains, Elena turned her head toward the shattered skyline. Bramberg, the city of empty markets, had fallen. But its people lived. Because of Wilhelm. Because of Scholz. Because of Rosa. Because even in the darkest night, someone had kept the light burning. Days passed. Snow continued to fall, but spring felt a fraction closer. Elena recovered slowly in a medical camp beyond the mountains. Many around her mourned loved ones left behind, some lost to war, others sealed beneath Bramberg until rescue teams could dig through the frost-covered stone. One morning, Father Matthias emerged from a makeshift chapel and found Elena staring toward the east, toward home. Without speaking, he offered her a small object wrapped in cloth. She opened it, a worn leather book. Reinhardt's poetry. Her tears fell freely now, not from despair but from remembrance. Inside the front cover, she found a final page, crumpled from battle, ink smudged by the snow. His handwriting. "If I do not see the first blossom of spring, let my heart bloom in the one who will. You are that spring, Elena. R. Wilhelm." Elena pressed the book to her chest, letting grief become love instead of pain. Father Matthias rested a hand on her shoulder. "What will you do now?" Elena looked toward the sunrise. "There are survivors still hidden below Bramberg," she said. "I will help dig them out. I owe them, and him, that much." The priest smiled gently. "He would be proud." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I will carry his hope," she whispered. "Until spring, and beyond." She stepped forward, one heavy step, then another, leaving footprints behind her in the fresh snow. The wind was cold. But the horizon glowed faintly pink, a promise of warmth. A promise of life. A promise kept.